Jack had just moved into a new apartment on a space station far from Earth. It was a large, bustling place full of all sorts of alien species. The station was a mix of cultures, and people from all over the galaxy came to live and work here. Jack, a young human, had gotten a job at one of the research labs on the station, and this was his new home. His apartment was small but cozy. The walls were made of smooth metal, and the windows looked out into the vast emptiness of space. There were no real trees or grass here, but Jack liked it. It was quiet, and he enjoyed the feeling of being so far from Earth. It made him feel like he was part of something bigger, something more exciting. But what Jack didn't expect was his new roommate. Her name was Lyra, and she was an alien from a distant planet. She was assigned to share the apartment with him because there were not many rooms available. Jack had been told she was a quiet person, and that seemed fine to him. After all, he didn't mind the idea of having a roommate, even if she was from another species. When Jack first saw her, he was a bit surprised. Lyra was unlike any alien he had seen in movies. She wasn't green or covered in scales. Instead, she had smooth, pale skin that seemed almost soft, and her eyes were a bright, glowing shade of blue. Her hair, long and silver, flowed like water, and she had an elegance to her that made her stand out. "Hi," Jack said awkwardly, extending his hand. "I'm Jack." Lyra smiled politely, her voice soft and melodic. "I'm Lyra. It's nice to meet you." The first few days were quiet. Lyra kept to herself, and Jack spent most of his time at work. They would sometimes exchange a few words, in passing, but there was no real conversation between them. Jack couldn't help but feel a little nervous around her. She was so different from the humans he knew. He had heard rumors that her species was mysterious and had abilities that humans couldn't understand, but he didn't want to judge her based on stories. Still, there was something about her that intrigued him. One evening, Jack had just finished a long day at the lab. He was tired, but he was looking forward to relaxing in his apartment. He stepped into the hallway outside his room and heard the sound of water running. He assumed Lyra was taking a shower. It wasn't unusual for the station's plumbing to make strange noises, but the sound was louder than normal, almost like a small waterfall. Without thinking, Jack walked toward the bathroom, intending to ask Lyra if everything was okay. He didn't think she would mind. After all, they were roommates now. But as he got closer to the door, he heard something that made him stop in his tracks. It wasn't the sound of a shower anymore. It was the sound of soft, rhythmic breathing. Jack's curiosity got the better of him, and he peeked through the small gap in the door. What he saw took him completely by surprise. Lyra was bathing in the large tub, but it wasn't like anything Jack had ever seen. Her form was changing, shifting like liquid. Her pale skin had a glow to it, and she was surrounded by a soft, shimmering light. It was as if her entire body was made of a fluid that changed colors and shapes as she moved. Jack could see her hair floating in the water like a silken cloud, and her eyes were closed in concentration. His heart raced. He didn't know what he had just witnessed, but it was like something out of a dream. Lyra's form was not what he had expected at all. He had assumed she would look like a typical alien, maybe with strange features or a more robotic appearance, but this was something far beyond anything his imagination could have prepared him for. Just as he was about to back away, he accidentally knocked over a small metal canister from the shelf beside him. It clattered loudly to the floor, and Lyra's eyes snapped open. Her blue eyes locked onto his, and for a moment they stared at each other in stunned silence. Jack froze. He was sure she would be angry. He had just invaded her privacy, and he felt like the worst roommate in the galaxy. Lyra's expression softened, though, and she didn't seem upset. Instead, she gave him a small, almost sad smile. "I didn't expect you to be so curious," she said, her voice calm but distant. Jack blushed, feeling embarrassed. I... I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I thought you were just taking a shower. Lyra nodded slowly, as if she understood. It's okay, Jack. It's just not something I usually share with others. She paused as if deciding whether or not to say more. My species is different. We don't always appear the way you would expect. Jack's mind was racing. He wanted to ask more questions, but he didn't know what was appropriate. He had seen something truly strange, something that went beyond anything he had ever imagined. He could tell that Lyra wasn't just another alien. There was something deeply mysterious about her, and he didn't know if he was ready to understand it. I'll leave you alone, Jack said, turning to walk away, but he couldn't stop thinking about what he had just seen. The image of Lyra in her strange, glowing form stayed with him long after he had returned to his room. As he lay in bed, his mind wouldn't quiet down. Who was she really? What had he just witnessed? And why did it make him feel both confused and fascinated at the same time? Jack knew one thing for sure. Life on the station was going to be a lot more interesting with Lyra as his roommate. But what he didn't know was that this accidental glimpse into her world was only the beginning of something much bigger, something that would change both of their lives forever. The days following the accidental encounter were strange. Jack had hoped the awkwardness between him and Lyra would fade, but it lingered. Each time they passed one another in the apartment, the air felt thick with unsaid words. Jack couldn't shake the image of Lyra in her mysterious, shifting form, and every time he looked at her, he felt both amazed and a little unsure of how to act. Lyra, on the other hand, seemed to go about her routine as if nothing had happened. She kept her distance, her usual quiet and reserved demeanor only making the situation more uncomfortable for Jack. She would spend her time in her corner of the apartment, often lost in her thoughts or working on something Jack couldn't understand. Sometimes he would hear her muttering in a language he didn't know, and he wondered if she was speaking to herself or something else entirely. Jack tried to carry on as if nothing was out of the ordinary. But every time he caught her looking at him, he could feel her eyes searching him, almost as if she was waiting for him to say something. But he didn't know what to say. He didn't know how to talk to an alien who could change her form, who could do things he didn't understand. More than once, he caught himself staring at her. Her strange, yet beautiful features, her eyes that glowed like the stars outside their window. But he quickly turned away, afraid she would catch him and think he was being rude. Days passed, and Jack found himself becoming increasingly curious about Lyra. What was she hiding? What else could she do? He had so many questions, but none that seemed appropriate to ask. His mind wandered back to the moment when he had seen her in the bathroom. She had looked so alien, yet so graceful. It was as if she belonged to a world that was far beyond anything he could ever understand. It was a quiet evening when Lyra finally broke the silence. "Jack," she said, her voice soft and calm. She was standing by the kitchen counter, looking out the window into space. Jack looked up from his book, surprised to hear her speak to him after days of awkward silence. "Yeah?" Jack said, his voice betraying his nervousness. Lyra turned to face him. "We need to talk," she said, her eyes steady and serious. Jack felt his heart race. This was it. This was the moment when everything between them would either get better or worse. "Sure. What's on your mind?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Lyra hesitated for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts. "I know things have been strange between us, since that night." She paused, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I didn't mean for you to see me like that, but I can't hide my true form forever. I think it's time you knew the truth." Jack felt a mixture of relief and fear. He had been hoping for an explanation, but now that it was happening, he wasn't sure he was ready for it. Lyra walked toward him slowly, her eyes never leaving his. My species. We are not like humans. We don't always look like this. The form you saw, it was my true form, the one I keep hidden from others. But I can change it at will, depending on how I want to be seen. Jack blinked, trying to wrap his mind around her words. You mean you can change your appearance whenever you want? Lyra nodded. Yes, but it's not just appearance, it's everything. My body, my energy, even the way I think. I can shift into different forms depending on the situation. Jack was speechless. He had never heard anything like this before. He had always thought of aliens as beings that were completely different from humans, but this was something far beyond that. Lyra wasn't just a different species. She was an entirely different kind of being, one with powers that defied his understanding. Why? Jack asked, his voice almost a whisper. Why do you hide it? Why not just be yourself? Lyra's expression softened and she sighed. It's complicated. My species is misunderstood. We've been persecuted for our abilities. People fear what they don't understand. If I were to reveal my true form to everyone, I would be in danger. It's safer this way. Jack nodded slowly, his mind racing with new questions. He had heard rumors about alien species being treated unfairly, but he hadn't realized how deeply it affected those who lived on the station. So, what happens now? Jack asked, trying to make sense of everything. Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and hope. Now, you know the truth. I don't expect you to fully understand, but I wanted you to know. I'm not like other aliens you've met. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to live my life, and I hope you can accept me as I am. Jack felt a strange sense of relief wash over him. Lyra wasn't some mysterious, dangerous creature. She was just someone trying to survive in a world that didn't understand her. And for the first time since they had met, Jack felt like he could breathe again. I do accept you, Jack said, his voice steady. I mean, I don't fully understand everything, but I get it. You've been through a lot, and I respect that. I won't judge you. Lyra smiled, her expression softening. Thank you, Jack. That means more to me than you know. The moment was quiet for a long time, as the two of them stood in the middle of the apartment trying to process the new reality between them. Jack didn't know where things would go from here. He didn't know if he could ever fully understand Lyra's life or her struggles, but he knew one thing for sure. Things had changed between them. The unspoken tension that had hung between them was now gone, replaced by a fragile understanding. But something else was growing, something deeper. As the evening wore on, they spoke more, slowly easing into a new, unspoken rhythm. Jack found himself feeling more comfortable around Lyra than he had before, though there was still so much he didn't know. It was as if they had crossed a line into a new kind of relationship, one that was both strange and familiar at the same time. By the time they went to bed that night, Jack was no longer just the curious human trying to understand his alien roommate. He was beginning to see her as something more, something unique, and maybe even someone he could trust. But as Jack lay in his bed, drifting off to sleep, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something far more complicated than he had ever expected. The days that followed were quieter, yet the air between Jack and Lyra felt different now. The awkwardness had mostly faded, replaced by a new understanding. They didn't talk about Lyra's abilities often, but Jack found himself thinking about them more and more. She wasn't like the aliens he had read about or seen in movies. She was different, complex, mysterious, and powerful in ways that were hard for Jack to fully grasp. One evening, after a long day at the lab, Jack returned home to find the apartment dimly lit. Lyra was sitting by the window, her back to him, staring out into the vastness of space. Her silver hair seemed to glow faintly, and Jack couldn't help but watch her for a moment before speaking. "Hey, Lyra," he said softly. Lyra turned her head slightly, her eyes meeting his. "Hi, Jack. You're home early." "Yeah, just needed a break. I was thinking, maybe we could talk some more?" Jack asked. He wasn't sure if she would be open to it, but he felt like there were still so many things he didn't understand. Lyra nodded, her expression calm. "Sure. There's more I've been meaning to tell you." Jack sat down across from her, feeling both nervous and curious. "You said your species can change forms. I guess I've been wondering, what does that really mean? Why do you need to hide your true form?" Lyra took a deep breath, as if preparing herself to open up more. She hadn't told him everything, and Jack sensed that there were parts of her life she still kept hidden. "It's not just about appearance, Jack," Lyra began. It's everything. When I shift, I'm not just changing how I look. I'm changing my energy, my mind, everything about me. The form you saw in the bathroom? That's my true form, the one I was born with. But I can change it at will. It's a survival mechanism." Jack leaned forward, his mind racing. "Survival? What do you mean?" Lyra's eyes softened, and she looked out the window again. "My species. We're known for our ability to change. But that's not something most people understand. In fact, most species see it as a threat. They fear what they don't understand. And because of that, we've been hunted, rejected, and isolated for centuries." Jack was silent for a moment, taking in her words. He had no idea what she had been through. He had assumed she was just another alien living on the station, but now he realized there was so much more to her story. Lyra continued, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. "We don't look like humans, and we don't act like most other species. We've learned to hide our true forms in order to survive. It's the only way to live without being hunted or persecuted." "Has it always been like that?" Jack asked, his voice gentle. "Have you always had to hide?" Lyra nodded, her gaze distant. "Yes, since the day I was born. I learned to change my form when I was young. It became a part of me, like breathing. But even though I can hide my true self, I never stop being who I am. And it gets harder, Jack. It's hard to keep pretending. It's exhausting." Jack felt a pang of guilt. He had never asked her about her past. He had never thought to ask why she seemed so distant, so reserved. He had simply assumed she was just another alien living on the station. But now he understood that there was so much more to Lyra's story. "I'm sorry," Jack said, his voice sincere. "I didn't know. I didn't realize how hard it must be for you." Lyra smiled softly. "It's not your fault, Jack. You couldn't know. Most humans don't." Jack sat back, thinking about everything Lyra had said. He had known that life on the station was different from Earth, but he had never considered how hard it must be for someone like Lyra. She wasn't just an alien. She was a person, with a past, fears and struggles of her own. He admired her strength, even if she didn't show it all the time. "Do you ever wish you could just be yourself?" Jack asked quietly. Lyra turned her gaze back to him, her eyes meeting his with an intensity he hadn't seen before. "Every day," she said softly. "But I can't. Not yet. The galaxy is full of fear, Jack. People fear the unknown. And I've learned to keep my distance, to protect myself." Jack felt a sense of helplessness wash over him. He wanted to help her, to make things easier for her. But what could he do? He was just a human, and she was something so much more than that. Still, Jack wasn't the type to back down. He had already made a promise to himself that he wouldn't let fear dictate how he treated Lyra. He didn't know what the future would hold, but he wasn't going to let her go through it alone. "I don't know what I can do to help you," Jack said slowly, "but I can listen, and I can stand by you. I don't care if you're different. You're You're still Lyra." Lyra's eyes softened, and for the first time, Jack saw a flicker of something like hope in her expression. "Thank you, Jack. That means more than you can imagine." They sat in silence for a while, the quiet hum of the station surrounding them. Jack had so many questions, but he knew Lyra wasn't ready to share everything yet. He didn't want to push her. Instead, he simply sat there, feeling the weight of everything she had shared with him. For the first time since they had met, Jack didn't feel like an outsider in Lyra's world. He felt like part of it. Maybe not everything would be easy between them, and maybe there were still many things they both didn't understand. But at that moment, Jack knew that no matter what happened, they would face it together. The days had grown warmer on the space station, and Jack had almost forgotten what it felt like to be caught up in his own thoughts. His life had started to settle into a new routine with Lyra. Their conversations had become easier, less tense. Though he still didn't completely understand her, Jack found himself becoming more comfortable around her, appreciating her quiet strength. One evening, after another long day at work, Jack returned to the apartment to find the door slightly ajar. He frowned, unsure of what to expect. Lyra usually kept the door closed when she was inside. Slowly, he pushed the door open, calling out softly, "Lyra?" There was no answer. The apartment was dark with only the faint hum of the stations, machinery filling the silence. Jack stepped inside, his heart pounding in his chest. Something felt off, but he couldn't put his finger on it. "Lyra?" Jack called again, walking through the living room and toward her room. Just as he reached the door, he heard the faintest sound. It was a strange, almost imperceptible noise, like a low hum mixed with a faint buzzing. Jack froze, his senses on, high alert. He turned toward the kitchen, where the sound seemed to be coming from. He didn't have time to think. He rushed forward only to find the kitchen was empty. But something was wrong. The lights flickered above him, and a loud bang echoed from somewhere deep within the station. Jack's heart raced as the noise grew louder. He didn't know what was happening, but the feeling of danger was growing stronger by the second. He grabbed the nearest tool from the workbench, unsure of what he would need, but knowing he had to be ready for anything. Then, suddenly the door slammed open. Lyra stood in the doorway, her form not quite human. Her eyes were glowing brightly, and her body seemed to shimmer with energy. Her usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by an urgency Jack had never seen before. "Jack," she said, her voice frantic, "we need to leave, now." "What's going on? What's happening?" Jack asked, his voice filled with confusion. "The station is in danger," Lyra explained quickly. "My people, they've found me. They're here." Jack didn't understand. "Your people? But I thought you said—" "They're not like me," Lyra interrupted, her voice sharp with worry. "They're not peaceful. They want to expose me for who I am. They'll do whatever it takes to get me back. And if they find out I'm here, they'll destroy everything." Jack's mind was spinning. He had never seen Lyra like this. She was afraid, and he had no idea what was happening. "But why? Why would they want to hurt you?" Lyra's eyes softened, but there was no time for explanations. "I'll explain later. Right now, we need to go. They're already on their way." Without another word, Lyra grabbed Jack's arm and pulled him toward the back of the apartment. Jack followed, his mind racing. He still didn't understand everything, but one thing was clear. Lyra needed him, and he wasn't going to leave her behind. They ran down the hall toward the emergency exit, but before they could reach the door, the station's alarms began to blare. Red lights flashed, and the entire station seemed to shake as if something large was coming their way. Jack's heart skipped a beat. "What's happening?" he shouted over the noise. "They've arrived," Lyra said, her voice barely audible. "We don't have much time. They'll be here any minute." As if on cue, the door to the exit burst open. A group of alien figures stood in the doorway, their eyes cold and emotionless. They wore dark, sleek armor that glimmered with a strange, otherworldly energy. Lyra stepped in front of Jack, her body brimming with energy. "Stay back," she warned, her voice trembling with fear and anger. "These are my people, but they're not here to help." The leader of the group, a tall alien with sharp, angular features, stepped forward. He regarded Lyra with disdain, his eyes scanning her form. "You should have stayed hidden, Lyra," he said in a voice that was both cold and authoritative. "Your secret was never safe. Now you will come with us, and you will face the consequences." Jack took a step back, feeling a surge of fear wash over him, but he couldn't let Lyra go. He couldn't just stand there and watch as they took her away. "I'm not going anywhere with you," Lyra said, her voice strong despite the fear in her eyes. "You won't take me." The alien leader laughed, a low, cruel sound. "You think you can stand against us? You are nothing but a fugitive, and your human companion will not save you." Jack stepped forward, his voice shaking but determined. "I don't know who you are, but I'm not letting you take her. Not without a fight." Lyra turned to him, her eyes wide. "Jack, no, you don't understand." But before she could finish, the leader raised his hand. A powerful energy field surrounded them, pushing Jack back against the wall with a force he couldn't resist. He gasped for air, his body pinned by the energy. Lyra stepped forward, her body crackling with energy as she prepared to defend herself. "Get away from him!" she shouted. The leader smirked. "You can't stop us, Lyra. We've waited too long for this." But as the leader raised his hand to strike, something unexpected happened. Jack, despite the pain from the energy field, managed to break free. With a strength he didn't know he had, he lunged toward the leader, knocking him to the ground. "Get away from her!" Jack shouted, his voice filled with a mixture of anger and desperation. Lyra's eyes widened in shock as she watched Jack struggle. "No, Jack, you're not ready for this." But Jack didn't care. He had made a promise to himself and to Lyra. He wasn't going to let her face this alone. No matter what happened, he was going to fight for her. As the station's alarms grew louder, the battle between Jack, Lyra, and the alien intruders intensified. Lyra fought back with all her strength, her energy shifting and changing with every strike, while Jack struggled to keep up. But together, they were more powerful than either could have imagined. With one final push, Jack and Lyra managed to defeat the group of intruders. They collapsed on the ground, breathless but alive. The space station was in chaos, but Jack and Lyra knew that their fight was far from over. The danger wasn't over yet, and they would need each other more than ever before. This part adds tension and action, heightening the sense of danger while deepening Jack and Lyra's connection. It sets the stage for their further struggles and strengthens their partnership as they face an unknown enemy. The station was in chaos. Sirens wailed, flashing lights filled the halls, and the shaking of the floor told everyone that the battle was far from over. Jack and Lyra stood side by side, battered but alive, as they watched the alien intruders retreat. Lyra's energy had surged with every attack, but now, as the dust settled, she looked exhausted. Her glowing eyes were dimming, and her body was still radiating with the energy from the fight. Jack glanced over at her, his chest heaving from the effort. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Lyra nodded slowly, but Jack could see the weariness in her expression. "I will be," she replied softly. "But we need to move. More will be coming." Jack's mind raced. He had never imagined his first few months on the station would involve running for their lives from an unknown enemy. But everything had changed in an instant. Lyra wasn't just his quiet, mysterious roommate. She was someone far more important, someone worth fighting for. And he couldn't let anything happen to her. "Where do we go?" Jack asked, looking around the apartment that had once felt like a safe place but now seemed more like a trap. "There's a hidden passage," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion. "I've used it before. It leads to a safe area near the control center. We can hide there until the station stabilizes. Jack followed Lyra down the dark hallway, trying to make sense of the events that had just unfolded. The leader of the alien group had been so sure of their victory, so confident that they could take Lyra without any resistance. But Jack had proven them wrong. He didn't have any special powers or alien abilities, but his determination to protect Lyra had made all the difference. As they approached a small door at the end of the hall, Lyra stopped. She turned to Jack, her eyes meeting his. "I need to tell you something, Jack." "What is it?" Jack asked, feeling a flutter of anxiety in his chest. He didn't know what else there was to learn, but he had a feeling Lyra wasn't done, revealing her past. Lyra hesitated before speaking. "My people, they won't stop. They think I've betrayed them by living here, among humans. They believe that I am a threat to their plans." Jack frowned. "But why? You haven't done anything wrong." Lyra's gaze darkened and she looked away for a moment. "I was part of something once, something I didn't agree with. They want to control the galaxy, Jack, and I refuse to be a part of it." "Then why didn't you tell me?" Jack asked, his voice soft. "You could have trusted me." Lyra closed her eyes, as if fighting back the weight of memories. "I wanted to, but I was afraid. Afraid that if you knew the truth, you wouldn't want to help me. I didn't want to risk losing." "You?" Jack reached out and placed a hand gently on her arm. "You won't lose me, Lyra. I'm with you. I don't care what your past was. I care about who you are now." Lyra looked at him, and for the first time, there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. She had been so afraid of being alone, of losing the one person who had seen her for who she truly was. But now, with Jack by her side, she felt a sense of relief she hadn't known in years. "Thank you, Jack," she whispered, her voice full of gratitude. They stood there for a moment, just holding on to each other before Lyra finally opened the door to the hidden passage. The small room beyond was dark, with only a faint light coming from the ventilation shafts above. The passage was narrow and winding, but Lyra led the way without hesitation, knowing it like the back of her hand. As they moved deeper into the passage, Jack couldn't help but think about everything that had happened. They had faced danger, uncertainty, and fear together. But they had also proven something to each other, that they could rely on each other no matter the circumstances. Finally, they reached the end of the passage. Lyra stopped in front of a thick metal door and punched in a code. The door hissed open, revealing a small control center. It wasn't much, just a few computers and a comm station, but it was safe, for now. "We can stay here until we figure out what to do next," Lyra said, her voice calmer now that they had some space between them and the danger. Jack nodded. "We'll figure it out together. We always do." Lyra sat down at one of the computers and started typing quickly, scanning the station's systems for any sign of the alien intruders. Jack paced behind her, unable to sit still. His mind was still racing with questions. What would happen now? Would they have to leave the station? And what about the rest of the galaxy? Would they be safe? Finally, Lyra turned around, her face serious. "The station's systems are still unstable. We can't stay here for too long, but there's a way out. I've made contacts with a group of people who can help us." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Help us how?" "They can get us off the station," Lyra explained. "They've been watching for a while. They know what my people are capable of, and they've been preparing for this moment." Jack felt a wave of relief wash over him. They weren't alone. There were people who would help them escape this danger. "Then let's do it," Jack said, his voice firm. "We'll leave this station and find somewhere safe." Lyra smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "I don't know what's next, Jack. But I do know one thing. I'm not running anymore. I'm not hiding. I've spent too long in fear, and I won't let them control me." Jack nodded, understanding her resolve. He had seen her strength before, but now he saw it in a new light. Lyra was no longer the quiet, mysterious roommate who kept her secrets locked away. She was someone brave, someone willing to stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. "We're in this together," Jack said, his voice filled with certainty. "And no matter what happens, we'll face it side by side." Lyra looked at him, her eyes full of gratitude and trust. "Thank you, Jack. I don't know what I'd do without you." "We'll figure it out," Jack replied, smiling. "Together, as..." They made their way to the escape pod, leaving the station behind. Jack and Lyra knew that this was only the beginning of their journey. They had faced the unknown and survived, but they knew there would be more challenges ahead. But with each other, they felt ready for whatever the future held. This part shows the resolution of the immediate danger while deepening the emotional connection between Jack and Lyra. Their partnership is strengthened, and they are ready to face whatever comes next. It also leaves room for further adventures and challenges.